Bang! Neeves Knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife Kara is busy. And in this video, we are talking about cardboard destroyers. Knives that are amazing for cutting up your recycling, cutting cardboard. And we're not necessarily talking about the steel. More or less, it's about the geometry of the blade and how it cuts. Now, this one is low on the list, mostly because you can't really do utility cuts. And sometimes you do need utility cutting when cutting up your recycling. Now these aren't necessarily in a particular order, but you know, because some of them, you know, like they could be flipped and one could be better than the other. But this one's definitely not as good at some things as the other knives when it comes to utility cuts. But for slicing, this thing is a beast. And you can get up nice and close to the blade. The ergos are amazing. It's nice and contoured, very round. This is the Tucson TS 264. It is on thumb studs, M390, titanium, and beautiful carbon fiber. The action is amazing. The thumb studs are the stop pin. I have a complete review on this, but the geometry is just, it is such a slicer. So let's get to the next one. Now the next one is the Rat 1. The Rat 1 has good geometry for slicing cardboard, great ergos. I mean, great action. It has a lot of things, but in today's market, you can find a lot better when it comes to value, steel, and a lot of things. But for performance and actual cutting, it's very, very good. Now, the tip, you can do utility cuts with it, but it might not be as good as some of the other models coming up. The Ontario Rat 1. Now, let's get into the Manix. Now, we're just going to say both Manix knives. Now, I would argue that this one right here is a cardboard monster and would definitely, in my opinion, do your recycling better than this one. But a lot of people don't like knives this size, but a lot of people do. But for utility cuts, for just straight slicing, this thing works great. Seeing as that it's such a tall, flat ground blade, it just passes through cardboard very nicely. Now, the smaller one, just the same. I mean, you have good utility cuts. You can get up nice and close to the blade for your push cuts, and it just drills through cardboard very nicely. The Spyderco Manix 2. And there are different versions of this, like lightweight versions, and this one's a modded one with titanium scales, but the Spyderco Manix 2. Next up is its cousin, but we're going to make it a 2. We'll bring all 3 out. The Para 2. Now, you could say also the Para 3, or either one, or you could use the Para 3 lightweight. Regardless, these things do cut very, very well. You have good ergos. The full flat ground blades do slice very well. And because of the tip, you can do good utility cuts. It has good piercing, has just the amount of belly, and this ramp right here really locks you in. The ergos are really nice back here, and then you use this ramp to like lay your thumb on, and it gives you a lot of pressure in that direction that just helps you cut, slice, and go through cardboard, and it just works really well. Now, there are a lot of knives with better geometry, but because of the way it's set up for your grip and the type of geometry it has, it works really good for cardboard. The most affordable best slicing knife on this list is the Tangram Progression. This knife is only $20, and it's 8 thousandths behind the edge, super thin hollow grind. The ergos are amazing. This thing cuts, oh my, it cuts insanely well. Now the action is good now that I, fixed the access to the lock bar, put a little jimping on the flipper tab, but for cutting performance, I mean, just straight out the gate, this thing is insane. It cuts so, so good. The deep hollow ground blade is just crazy. And a Kudo steel is, it's very easy to get extremely sharp. So that's also another thing. I mean, very easy to sharpen, and it's like a 440C, so very easy to get extremely sharp. And man, this thing just cuts so good. The ergos for the blade, you know, it just, man, it works so good. Next, we have the Practic. Now this one is really, really nice because one, it has amazing geometry. It has a great blade shape for cutting cardboard, and the ergos, it has a great thickness of handle, great depth, and it just locks you in. It's very, very comfortable. I do feel the clip quite a bit, but it's still very comfortable in the hand, and it just works. And if it wasn't for this clip, you know, being in my hand, I mean, that honestly is kind of an issue, the clip, but besides that, I mean, this thing cuts really good. You can do utility cuts, beautiful, nice and thin, hollow ground blade. And the Practic has amazing action. This flipper tab has really good leverage, man. This action is really good, and just a great knife. Now, you do want to be careful not to let the cardboard get caught up into the choil, but you can place your finger there and stop it, or just, you know, be cognitive of it and not let it happen. Next, now let me just say there are some knives that could have been better on this list, but some knives I didn't put on the list because of price. Maybe they were a little too expensive, or maybe they're just very hard to get or discontinued or whatever reason. So I'm trying to get some pretty available knives that are also somewhat affordable. Here is the Sencut Actium. This thing is a monster for cutting cardboard. One, it has amazing, amazing ergos. I mean, the ergos are just fantastic. It has the jimping up here that just bites your finger really good, and you have that leverage, you know, pushing down, kind of like the Spyderco. And in this grip, it just works really good. And even better, you have a choil area. So you can prevent the cardboard from falling into the choil, or you can hold it back here and, you know, just make sure your cardboard stays up there. Either way, this thing's thin, very thin, hollow ground blade, great blade shape. You can do utility cuts, slicing, push cuts. It just works so good. The handle, it just gives you such good ergos. This little place right here gives you a good spot for pushing. And yeah, man, the Sencut Actium is a great, great knife. Next, we have, now this one's a little bit more pricier, but this is the Artisan Centauri. Now, the Artisan Centauri is a little bit more pricier, but man, this thin hollow ground blade just goes through material so good. Good ergos. I mean, it has a nice neutral grip. The thing is, though, it is a little thin, so you might find knives a little bit more comfortable, but it's still extremely comfortable. I mean, it works really good. And because of the relationship between the blade and the handle, and that's kind of what this is about, is good geometry and then a good handle to blade relationship for cutting, and a knife that passes through cardboard really well. Well, this one has all of that, and you can do great utility cuts. The Artisan Centauri. This is a great, great knife. Front flipper, very easy front flipper too. The Savvi Elementum. Now this one's a little smaller, and this is the S35VN version, so it's a little bit thinner blade, but even though it's a small knife, it works really good for lots of things. You can do utility cuts, and it has a nice thin hollow ground blade. Being the S35VN version, it's a little thinner than the D2 version, and it cuts really, really nicely. Now, this isn't necessarily the knife I would grab to cut up my cardboard. I would grab something a little bit bigger, but a lot of people don't like giant knives, so for a smaller knife, this is a great cardboard cutter. You can get good grips for this cut. You can put your finger right there on that choil. It's good for, it's easy to sharpen. You can get good push cuts. The jimping works, so you can lock yourself in. Great, great knife for cutting cardboard. Next up, now this one could possibly be number one. It definitely has the best ergos on the list. The Tucson TS 162. The ergos on this thing is so amazing. It has such a good grip. Then this jimping right here is nice and sharp, and it gives you that pressure that pushes down. You're really pushing into your cuts, and it works really good. Now it has plenty of belly for slicing. The geometry is very, very thin. We'll take a look. If you look at the choil area right here, you can see how thin it gets. It gets very, very thin, and you can put your finger there. It is a little tight, so, but since you have a 4-inch blade, you don't really have to worry about it slicing in and out. It's not a small blade, so you have plenty of blade to keep from here forward and not letting it get caught in the choil. So because of the ergos, the grip, man, this thing cuts really good. This one happens to be an S90V titanium and carbon fiber. And I personally haven't had an issue with the S90V, but I also haven't done a cut test with it, meaning like counted my cuts. But like I said, this isn't about the steel. This is about the cutting and ergos. And this thing is a champ. Also, the utility cuts are fantastic. Great knife, man. This thing is just an amazing knife. All right, next up, we have, man, the last ones are just, it's hard to place which one should go first. And in all reality, none of these are all from that Tucson forward. Actually, pretty much all the knives on this list, maybe except for like the first three, are insane cardboard destroyers. The Spyderco Galiley. This thing is a champion at cutting cardboard. Look at this grip. The ergos are just so neutral. It allows you to quickly get push cuts, slicing, utility cuts. Very thin behind the edge. I think this one was like 10, 12 thousandths behind the edge. And then the hollow ground blade really passes through materials. You have a nice tip for utility cuts, but man, you can just get up nice and close to that blade, and it has a great thickness for the depth. It feels really comfortable in the hand, and it just works. For cutting performance, this thing is amazing. Amazing, amazing cutter. And the M4 really, really holds up. Next up, the Savvi Picaro. This has been probably my favorite cardboard cutting knife for a long time. But the last few knives definitely, are very competitive to it. But look at how thin this blade stock is. Super thin blade stock, 4-inch blade, very thin behind the edge. I think this one was 15 thousandths behind the edge. Great for sharpening. It's in D2. You have the choil there where you can get really close to the blade for push cuts. A big handle, and a very neutral grip where, you can place your hands wherever you want to and it's comfortable, But man, it just slices like a dream. You can get great utility cuts. And I know my background's kind of hiding it, but man, this thing just cuts like a champ and takes a really good edge. It is D2. So it's an affordable knife that destroys cardboard. And you have thumb studs or reverse flicking action or Spidey flicking, whatever you want to call it. It is on phosphor bronze. Ooh. Great, great knife. The Sheepdog. Now, I just recently got the mini Sheepdog with the hole, which also works really good because I can actually get a full grip on the mini Sheepdog because it doesn't have the flipper tab right there. But the big one specifically, even though both of these work great, this is basically a full flat grind. And you're probably looking at it like, no, it's not. But this hump right here is very subtle. So it's very similar to a full flat ground blade. Like that little hump for the cardboard to get over is very, very minimal. So the grip and the ergos when you're locked in right here. I wish it had jimping like this one does. This one actually has jimping. I wish it did, because that would make it even better. Man, this thing is just an ultimate box cutter. You have great amount of leverage with this swell right here. It kind of just fills the palm of your hand to push through cardboard. You can get it in this grip right here and just go right down the side of a box. The tip is basically like a razor blade. I mean, it just crazy good leverage into that tip for utility cuts. I mean, this thing has amazing utility cuts, and you can kind of lay it sideways in your hand and do the pinch, and you can also do that with slicing. It just cuts cardboard up like it doesn't exist. I mean, it's such a good cardboard destroyer. It takes a very, very sharp edge. The geometry is just very good for splitting cardboard. Now, the other blades in this category possibly do cut a little bit better than this one, but either way, this thing is an amazing cardboard and recycling destroyer. I mean, if you have this knife and you have a couple boxes out in your garage or in your living room that need to go to recycling, use it. Try it one time and you'll see how great this thing is at destroying cardboard. Number 1 on this list, the Alien Knives DX2. This knife is insane. One, it's like 8 thousandths behind the edge. The hollow ground is so thin that I can't even get it on camera. It's just, I'll try, but it's so thin. It's so deep, the hollow, and the blade stock is nice and thin. Nice, big, tall grip. You can get good utility cuts and amazing slicing. You can get up nice and pretty tight to the blade. You do have the choil here that you could block with your finger if you really want to, but it's not the most comfortable like that. But you have a nice tall, you know, pretty significant blade to use, you know, without having to get anything in the choil. You have so much cutting length there. I mean, look at this. So basically, you can keep the cardboard resting against here and it's never going to make it to there, you know, so because, you know, it blocks it. But man, this thing cuts like a beast. Now these things, I'm not sure when the next drop is coming, but I'm pretty sure more are coming. I know there are still some titanium models, or maybe, I think it's in Damascus though. They are a bit more expensive, but man, if you want a cardboard destroyer, this thing is insane. Love this knife. Love, love, love this knife. And it's just hard to beat a knife that cuts this good. It cuts so good. And for cardboard, it's insane. Now, a lot of these knives on this list would be really good for cutting other things too. So this is just one specific thing that they cut very well. I love you guys. Peace.